Welcome to a new era of home building, where we explore sustainable home building, high-performance design, innovative offsite construction, and groundbreaking practices that are transforming the home building industry. This podcast is produced by Unity Homes, a brand of Bensonwood. Welcome back. I'm your host, Allison Kay, sales lead at Unity Homes.
And I'm your co-host, Mark Hertzler, director of Unity Homes. Today we're speaking with Amanda Weglinski, a design project manager with the Bensonwood Design Group. Amanda has over 20 years in the design field, and she has recently worked with a team to develop the open home offerings. If you're more interested in finding out about open home, you can check out open home on bensonwood.com. So Amanda, welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Well, thank you, Mark and Allison, for having me. I think it's a really exciting time to be at Bensonwood in this specific season, so I feel very blessed to be here. I've been in the field of architecture, as you mentioned, for 20 years, and it's a great joy to interact with clients on what often is the sort of biggest purchase of their life and be able to help shepherd and lead that project towards construction. On the Bensonwood Design Group, we're a group of architects and designers. We have a wonderful team here that helps support that effort on the build side as well, and so it's just exciting to be part of a greater team. And we work on both open homes and custom projects. Open home is a product home that we have designed in collaboration with Karen Timberlake of Pennsylvania and Lake Flato of Texas. They're both world-renowned architecture firms in their own right. And together we have a collection of product homes that represent the collective intelligence of the design teams and the legacy of the firms that we're all part of.
With that nice overview, let's jump into our topic for today on design efficiency and sustainability. So we want to focus on what are the design elements, the design conversations that can happen to improve energy efficiency and sustainability within a home design.
So what kind of design decisions are you thinking through in regards to energy efficiency, aside from the building science, where we're talking about the insulations and the air tightness? That's the building science part of it. What's the design aspect to energy efficiency?
Yeah, I think generally when we are starting to work with clients in designing their home, we're always trying to right size the house. And so making sure that we're not inflating the square footage unnecessarily. We're focused on really how each individual family uses their space. And so I can think back on past projects where clients really enjoyed just having the bedrooms be a place for sleeping and not for activities. So we were able to, for instance, really cut the square footage down of the house because the bedrooms were all much smaller. They just had a bed in it. And other clients have needs that we try to think about that maybe are more flexible so that we can share spaces. Sometimes sharing spaces is an opportunity to cut down square footage as well, using them for multiple purposes.
Yeah, and that's great because I think I've recently read that for many, many years, the average size of a home in the U.S. had been increasing, and now recently it's actually starting to decrease a little bit, and people are getting away from that sort of McMansion attitude of I need a bigger house to now I need the right size house. It not only cuts costs up front, but it also cuts your operating costs going forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think the average home in the United States is around 2,000 square feet, and other countries in Scandinavia are closer to 1,200 to 1,400. So there's areas to improve.
I tend to be really drawn to the spaces that are multi-use too. We have a lot of projects that will do a room off the living room that can be kind of included in that living room space or closed off. So it often is playing a multi-purpose use of a library or office as well as a guest room, or again, that extended living space and the ability to close rooms off and include them and when you need them. And there's just a lot to be said for not wasting space, especially when it comes to your heating and cooling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, when we're speaking with our clients initially, we try to think of the life cycle of the house. And even a season that they might be in now with young children, we might think of that flexible space to serve one purpose, like a homeschooling room. But in the future, does it become a guest bedroom, or even beyond that, does it become the first floor primary suite when it's coupled with other areas on the first floor? So I think thinking about the longevity of the house and how it could be flexible over, many years is a helpful consideration.
Good. And how about the design itself, sort of the shape? Any thoughts there on how that affects energy efficiency?
So we know in the Northeast that the most efficient design is a compact plan. And part of the reason for that is because we're cutting down on the amount of wall area. Of course, when we have walls, we want to put windows in those, and those are the less efficient part of the wall. So it just makes the overall envelope less efficient.
Yeah, and you bring up windows, which was something else I wanted to touch on. There's a double-edged sword to windows. Everybody wants more glazing. Everybody wants more natural light. But as you pointed out, there is a sort of a negative impact of windows. And so how do you balance that out when it comes to design and energy efficiency?
We often are inspired by the site and especially views from the home out to the site. That's our starting place oftentimes. We're thinking about the solar orientation and where we might locate windows so we're getting the good warmth of the sun in the wintertime when we want it, but also being concerned about shading in the summertime when we wouldn't want to overheat the house. So those views and passive solar orientation are two things we focus on. I would also say in general, we try to underglaze the north side of the building, where you're often just losing heat in the winter time because there's no solar gain. We try to have that help and compensate a little bit for maybe how we might be overglazing the south side of the building or the east side of the building.
Yeah, so good balancing of that glazing and the siding, definitely important. How about the mechanicals? How do you work those into the design and get those as efficient as possible?
Generally, we try to have the mechanical room centrally located, and we bury it within the plan, but it usually does need to have access to an exterior wall, so we try to be thoughtful about that. So I think in general, shortening any of the runs, whether it be for water or ductwork, to where it's delivering out to the perimeter is a way to be more efficient. And again, if you're doing a more compact plan, then that's one way you can achieve that.
Have you ever been involved in the design? This is going to be kind of an odd question, but a design where you worked in something with energy efficiency and in retrospect, realized maybe that wasn't the greatest approach or maybe that didn't work. And one thing I'm thinking of is kind of off the wall there, but we had a client who was really interested in a wastewater heat recovery system, which basically the incoming water wraps around the waste pipe that we have, like hot water from your shower going out, so you're recovering some of that water. Sounds great, but I think in reality, maybe probably didn't provide that much efficiency. So you have any other examples that you could think of like great idea, but it just never really worked out?
Well, I think one thing that clients are often bringing to us are the ideas of exterior blinds. And so the purpose with those would be to block the sun from coming into the building so that the mechanical system is not expending energy to cool the house down, especially in the summertime. And I have concerns about how well those operate year round. I know that we have some clients that use them in the winter, and I worry that they're just more delicate. And with our snow and ice, that it just could be a long-term maintenance problem trying to fix a solar glare problem or a solar heating issue, overheating issue in the summer.
Yeah, so I think sometimes we try to outsmart ourselves, and it really comes back to the basics, as you had mentioned, the tight design, really thinking through the glazing in the windows and right-sizing the house. Those are the things that make the biggest impact, as opposed to some of these sort of neat-sounding ideas, but more complicated than they're worth.
Sure.
So moving on from energy efficiency, what about water efficiency? Now, I know a lot of the focus on water efficiency is on the actual fixtures and low flow and, toilets that are low flush or, low water when they flush, things like that. But beyond that, from a design perspective, what are some other things that can be done to improve water efficiency?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do. There can be water collection. Sometimes we're harvesting water off of roofs and collecting them into barrels, and really at a basic level. Like some of our clients are extremely sophisticated gardeners, and just having that free water to be able to water their garden makes a big difference, to not fire up the hose. There's more sophisticated water collection systems. But I'd say additionally, generally we're trying to promote natural landscapes. So we're doing less grass and more native plantings, and they can take the summer heat and also the drought of the summer and don't need to be watered all the time.
There's also the aspect of siting the home on the site.
Yes, when we usually start with a site visit, and it gives us a really good understanding of the topography of the site. And we try to be very sensitive about where the house ultimately will be located so that we're minimally disturbing the site and retaining its natural features. So for instance, if you have a site that has a very steep incline on it, to make a spot, really a flatter spot for the house to land, you would have to cut and fill a lot of that site. Trucking and fill, there's a cost to that, but there's also a cost to the planet for that as well in terms of the exhaust from the trucking of material. And reshaping the landscape obviously has effects too. We have to be cognizant about how water flows and where does that water go, making sure that we're not impacting other properties. So I think in general, our goal is to be as minimally invasive as possible, which is also really good for nature and the flora and fauna that are inhabiting our sites.
And tying the site design back with landscape design, I think there's some strategic things you can do with planting the right kind of trees to give you shading in the summer and, windbreaks and things like that. So you can kind of tie that site design into the landscape design along with the home design to create a really cohesive, efficient, sustainable, I want to say ecosystem, but I guess it really is an ecosystem in that sense.
Absolutely. We often will work with a landscape architect and use strategic trees to help with a windbreak, as you mentioned. So we might put an evergreen tree that is going to stay kind of green and heavily leaved throughout all seasons, and pepper that in with some deciduous trees that are losing their leaves but will allow more sunlight to come through in the wintertime.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. How about the materials that are being specified for a house?
We try to focus on natural materials that are sustainable. They can be harvested. Wood's a great example. And there's just some really great products out there that are thermally modified. Koya is one of them that we've been using a lot of recently. There's also Kebony and Thermery, a couple other companies. The companies impregnate the wood fibers and then bake out the material that they've impregnated to make the wood be more robust. It's more resistant to water and bugs, and just the product itself will last much longer than a regular piece of wood siding.
And what a great way to take a natural product and make it even better.
We do have clients that are interested, depending on their location, in fire-resistant construction, even on their residence. And so we have solutions for siding options and roofing options that are not non-combustible and lean into those needs.
In terms of timbers and things like that, any exterior woods we like to have be tropical woods because they do much better in the outside environment and moisture and rain. But we have a very big effort to always have those be FSC certified. And so there's a whole department too that works with those woods and maintains those certifications. And it's a pretty important thing when you're working with tropical woods because of the potential for rainforest deforestation and things like that for these really well sought after woods that do so well outside, but to make sure that, they're sourced sustainably.
Yeah, I would agree.
And you touched on this a little bit on the resilience and durability. So I think that's a pretty common concern of people now with weather events, whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes or wildfires, or even here in the Northeast, recently we've had the smoke from wildfires. We haven't had the actual wildfires, but they've blown in from Canada, things like that. So what kind of design things are happening to improve the resiliency and the durability of a house?
Yeah, on the Bensonwood side, we have had clients that have been particularly concerned about that. And one of the ways that we've solved that problem is by designing a timber frame system inside of our shell. So we have the redundancy of, our walls are self-supporting unto themselves. They don't necessarily need a timber frame, but in a few of these homes that we've designed recently, we did do the timber frame plus the walls. And so we feel like that redundant system is more robust to withstand, potential future natural disasters. The timber frame in general is great because it is resistant to fire in the sense that when it does catch on fire, it chars and it creates a protective layer around the timber frame. And so it makes it more challenging for there to be full burn through of the structure. So we think those are, good properties and very helpful for the long term.
I think that's kind of an interesting fact that it seems counterintuitive, but a wood timber frame in many instances will do better in a fire than steel will, because steel gets to a certain temperature and it just fails.
Right.
Whereas you said the wood will char and kind of protect itself from burning all the way through. So that seems counterintuitive, but I think that's a very interesting fact.
The open-built systems that used by Benson Wood and Unity also are kind of disentangling the different systems within a home that allows it to be used for a longer period of time. So it's the thought of separating systems that we know have a shorter lifespan or are going to change and need updating in a shorter amount of time than the structural systems, the air barrier, the insulation, things like that we want to maintain for the life of the home. Is there any other ways that we can think about that, the disentanglement of the systems in design as well?
Yeah, Allison, I agree with that 100%, especially as we think about technologies with audio-video equipment and speaker systems. They're all just rapidly changing, and it's really much more helpful if those things can be exposed. I'm actually working on a project right now where, of course, since COVID, home offices have become just the norm as part of the program. And so clients are particularly interested about how they, get their printer and, they almost have like a server closet between their offices, and how do they get just those basic connections to their computer, electrical and internet and otherwise. So I think keeping the system separate and accessible is really helpful, and our OB Plus wall is a great solution for that. But we also try to be thoughtful about that too in the design. And so there could be some areas in the home where we drop the ceilings and actually even have, something that's more like a commercial product where there would be a dropped ceiling that you can access cabling and wiring up above the ceiling, but it's kept out of your view, so it's not disturbing to look at. When we're in the early phase of design, we like to talk to our clients about thinking about the longevity of their house, even for generations beyond their ownership. Maybe it's a legacy home that their children would inherit, or, just a completely different homeowner. And so we try to think about even disentangling the structure so that we minimize the amount of bearing walls around the interior of the house, so that there's opportunity for flexibility in the future to reconfigure the home in a different way. Over many generations, we're learning to live differently, than our grandparents' generation even. So that's something we can relate with. And so who knows how people might be living here in the future.
Yeah, and regardless of, what happens in the future, the house still has that really solid envelope, which is, as Allison mentioned, the air barrier and the insulation layer, which doesn't change, but the infill inside can change over time. I think one of the biggest examples that we talk about is a kitchen. So you're starting out, you put a kitchen in that you can afford. Like, in my case, I know Allison's case with young kids, you know that kitchen's going to take some wear and tear. And eventually at some point, you can take it out and you can replace it without having to, redo a significant portion of your house.
So another aspect of sustainability is waste, right? Eliminating waste. What are some things for waste reduction and maybe even recycling that can be part of the design?
During the design phase, we try to design with a 2-foot grid in mind, and that gives us the opportunity to be less wasteful when cutting materials. If you think of a 4x8 sheet of plywood that's divisible by 2 feet, and we can actually reuse the offcuts if we're cutting the sheet down in other areas of the home.
That's where product homes, I think, really shine in their efficiency and sustainability, as well as the ability to think through down to that level of detail. And of course, thinking about waste reduction, our offsite fabrication is definitely aiding in that. Our ability to design for the specific lumber and shipping capacities, really paired with the CNC cutting, really allows us to reduce the waste that we create to begin with. And then on site, we have minimal waste. There's almost no waste at all on site. We're even utilizing the packaging for our bundling, which is a recycled material, and we're collecting that, bringing it back from the site making sure that it gets shipped back to the manufacturer and turned into the very same plastic that we're using for that next round of projects. So offsite fabrication is a huge waste reduction element.
And it does go into the insulation. There's many reasons why we like this dense pack cellulose, but one of them is that it's a recycled product.
Even our 24-inch on-center framing reduces the amount of studs that are in a wall. A typical wall has 16-inch on-center.
Well, this has been really great, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some insight into the Bensonwood Design Group and efficiency and sustainability.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new era of home building. If you're passionate about high-performance homes like we are, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay tuned for our next episode on The Pretty Good House Book with builder and co-author Dan Colbert from Colbert Building in Portland, Maine. You can also visit unityhomes.com to learn more about our upcoming events, subscribe to our newsletter, check out our home plans, and get in touch. Thanks to George Peavy, Jason Reamer, and Josh Reamer of our company's very own Plum Gable Band for the music you hear on this podcast. And thanks to Damaris Graham for the production and editing of the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, I'm Allison Kay.
And I'm Mark Hertzler.
And here's to better building.